G'day, and welcome to Hooked on Sport, where each week Ben Hook reveals the most remarkable SA sporting stories from the elite to the grassroots. It's the 14th of November and the Cars are in Adelaide. In this episode, Ben looks at the Strikers women's team and covers records being made at the Prospect and Uraidla cricket clubs. He looks at women's and men's netball, shares a love story from harness racing, selects a standout from the AFLW All-Australian squad, tips into volleyball, and shares the overnight story of Steven Alderson's historic maiden victory on the DP Tour. Here's South Australia's local sports expert, Ben Hook. G'day, Hookie.
Wallace, g'day. Hey, can I just take everyone behind the curtain of the way we produce this show for a second? First thing happens, as far as I'm concerned, is that you say, g'day, Hookie, and I say, how you going? I actually, and you know full well that I'm not a great listener to our show because I don't love listening to myself, but I listened to last week's episode, and you give me the greatest plug of all time before, as a pre-record, before you actually bring me into the show. And I've got to say, I don't deal with compliments all that well. You're wonderful to me, and you've got no need to be, my man. We're just good mates here. You can just tell the story as it normally is. Just, yeah, he's an old banger who used to work at the Sunday Mail, and now he chats to me for 20 minutes a week.
We're doing this late Wednesday night.
It is late, isn't it?
It is late. I think children are in bed.
Hey, now, before we get into it, I know you got a list of things you want to ask me about, and that's fine. But, hey, good week for us. You've been following the US election. Donald Trump got in basically on the strength of independent media. Podcasts like us, mate. Joe Rogan, we're only a couple of 100 million downloads behind him, but we're on our way.
We are. We've got some great listeners, and we really appreciate a lot of the feedback we're getting at this point in our early days. Yes, the Rogan one, that was fascinating.
Yeah, my goodness. What a market that is.
Unbelievable.
Just to turn your back on mainstream media and do it all on independent media like that, and that's basically carried him back into the White House. Hard to believe.
Maybe we'll be able to catch Joe Rogan one day. Hooking.
Yeah, or Theo Von, one of those guys. I'm sure that everyone around the world wants to hear about our opinions on South Australian community sport.
Now, we're recording this late Wednesday night, and the Strikers seem to have gone down again.
Yeah, they have lost, and they've lost pretty badly, to be honest, Wallace. And they're 7 games down now. They're only 1 win. They're bottom, and they're not going to play finals. So after winning the last 2 titles, this is a real fall from grace, to be honest. I find it really difficult to be critical about the Adelaide Strikers women because they've been so good for so long in a competition and a form of the game in particular that is... It's quite fickle. I mean, it is difficult to be so good for so long in such a short form of the game. So, yeah, they've been disappointing this year. A couple of things I would probably have to suggest. Their fielding has been below par. They've really let themselves down in the field. And in actual fact, I watched the game tonight, and there was a couple of catches that no one got a hand to just because 2 players looked at each other hoping the other one was going to go for it. So, yeah, as I said, been amazing for so long, so I'm not going to be super critical, but they played the Hobart Hurricanes tonight, a team that they would beat routinely in the last 2 or 3 years, and they got absolutely pants tonight. So, yeah, a bit of work for Luke Williams to do. He's got an oldish group as well, so, and I can understand why he's been loyal to them for so long. And I mean, Megan Schutt's still a superstar, and I'm a big fan of Amanda Jade Wellington. But yeah, there's probably going to have to be a bit of a turnaround of that side in the coming months because they really have fallen off the perch a bit.
Have the other teams lifted their game?
Yeah, I think that's true. Certainly, what I'm seeing from the other teams is that they're enterprising, and they're coming up with methods that the Adelaide Strikers aren't coping with, which they've been able to cope with the quality of these teams in the past. So it's undoubted that the other groups have improved and maybe taken 1 or 2 steps past the Adelaide Strikers who, have probably relied on what they've done in the past simply because it's been so successful. So, they're going to have to start to become a little bit more enterprising. This season's done, but certainly WBBL 11, they'll need to be a little bit more creative and probably think about who their international players are as well. They brought in Smriti Mandana this year, star from India, who's been okay without being sensational. Laura Woolvart really has fallen off the pace this year. I wonder if she'll be back next year. And the third international was Ulla Prendergast, who's an all-rounder who's been okay, But I just watch her field and I think, my goodness, every time that she has to do something good in the field, she makes a mistake and costs the team a run or drops a catch. So without trying to sound too much like doom and gloom, there is going to have to be a bit of a mini overhaul of that team, I suspect, when the end of this season comes around.
Now, sticking with cricket, we have a Kyle in the world who's a legendary swimmer, and we've got a fast bowler who is making waves as well.
It's an interesting story, this guy, Kyle Scrimgeour, we're talking about. He plays his Premier cricket in with Prospect, which is in Division 2 of the SACA Premier first grade competition at the moment. He's been around the place for around about 10 years, Wallace. He was an Australian under-19 in 2014, came down from Darwin and looked for everything like he was going to be the next, Cameron Green, real star of the game, and never quite found his feet at the Premier level. Here he is now. He's late 20s, and maybe the game has got a little bit past him, but he's played against Northern Districts, so Prospect versus Northern Districts on the weekend, and he's taken 9 for 27, which I think is about 5th all-time in Prospect's history for bowling figures. So we clearly got it, and I understand this. Some people are slightly later bloomers than others. He was clearly identified very early as a special talent. But 9 for 27, incredible performance. So I just love to see a kid like Kyle just continue to fire a few bullets like that, because he's a smoky later in his career, but good quality all-rounders are just so valuable in white ball cricket. And whether it's for the South Australian men's team or even a BBL franchise, I beg your pardon, I would implore Kyle to keep it up, because you don't perform like that without having some quality, and who knows where he could go.
Now let's stay with cricket and head up to the Hills League, and there's an opener who's, as you've described, is high octane.
I'm going to spend a bit of time. We all watch Jake Fraser McGurk, right? Because we just love the way that he walks to the crease and tries to just bludgeon every ball to the boundary. Well, there's a bloke up in the Adelaide Hills Cricket League. His name's Jack Reed. He plays for Stirling, and he is doing it routinely. He's got only 229 runs for the year, which isn't an absolute mammoth amount of runs, but he scored them in 148 balls, and this is in a one-day competition. So a run a ball is good going at that level of cricket, and he scored 229 and 148. I'm going to keep a very, very close eye. We might do a weekly watch, Wallace, on Jack Reed and just see where he ends up at the end of the year, because he could end up with around about 1,000 runs and scored them in 600 balls. That would be... I tell you what, if you're floating around Stirling in the next few weeks, just pop into the local oval, and hopefully if you get there about 1 o'clock, you might see Jack Reed go nuts for half an hour. It'd be worth watching.
And if you're driving past Uraidla, have a look at the A2s, and there's a gentleman up there, Hookie, who's scoring an amazing amount of runs and not getting out.
This caught my eye only a day or so ago, Wallace. Felix Godomsky-Mott, so that's his hyphenated surname, Godomsky-Mott. He scored 605 runs already for the season. When you think we're not out of November yet, that's pretty incredible. He's only been out twice, so he's averaging 302.5. His 5 hits so far are 110, 90, 88, 217, and 100. And obviously 3 of those are not out as well. So going all right, isn't he, Felix? I think he's played a little bit of Premier Club cricket for East Torrens, but back there at Uraidla now. I reckon with a stretch of form like that, there'll be a Premier Club who might be inviting him back down onto the plains very, very shortly. Keep an eye out for that name, Felix Godomsky-Mott.
Indeed. Now, harness racing, you've got a love story to share with us.
Best story of the year, this one, Wallace. Samantha Pascoe, young up-and-coming trainer-driver in the harness racing world. Family involved, so she knows her way around a horse, but she's been one of the really impressive drivers of the competition. She drove the winner in the final race, Trumpy's Legend, it was called. So that was the 9th race at Globe Derby on Saturday night. That was actually her birthday. So happy birthday to Sam Pascoe. Second in that field was Magic Storm. It was driven by Wayne Hill. Well, how about this? The following day, on Sunday, so 3 days ago, Samantha Pascoe and Wayne Hill got married. A quinella at the Trots as the last race on Saturday night, and then Sunday afternoon, they tie the knot, the pair of them. Brilliant. So very, very cute story. I've met them both, know them well. They're really, really good young kids. Interestingly enough, so Sam will change her name from Samantha Pascoe to Samantha Hill. Wayne Hill obviously keeps his name. Third in that race on Saturday night can't remember the name of the horse, to be honest, but it was driven by Wayne's sister, Danielle Hill. So even though Globe Derby is a very, very flat track, we're going to see hills galore in harness racing in coming weeks. Danielle Hill, Wayne Hill, and now Samantha Hill. So what a beautiful story. Quinella on Saturday night, and then tied the knot on Sunday afternoon. So congratulations to Sam and Wayne Hill, the newlyweds, and the beautiful love story of harness racing.
Yeah, what a great story. What a great story indeed. South Adelaide netball. Tell us about what's happening with the men and women at South Adelaide.
If you follow netball in South Australia, you think that it is all about contacts and matrics. And I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say that South Adelaide Netball Club is on the verge of becoming the next powerhouse of the sport here in South Australia. Wallace, they should have won the Women's Premier League Grand Final this year. They lost in extra time to contacts. It was controversial, to be honest. They were actually up by 6 in the late part of the first period of extra time. There's 2 periods of extra time. They're up by 6, and then their goal shooter got sent off early in the second period of extra time. That was the right decision. I'm not going to argue with the umpires there, but a lot were very, very upset that the goal shooter was sent off. That's what happened. They lost by a goal in the end, so it was an absolute nail-biter, heartbreak for South Adelaide, who, by any stretch probably should have won that game, and they kind of blew it in a way. But what we're seeing now is the men's competition, both at Super League and Super League Reserves competition, and I can tell you, Wallace, that we are seeing once again the dominance of the South Adelaide Netball Club. So they're getting it done on a couple of incredible goal shooters. In the women's competition, it's Maggie Kerr at goal shooter and Jess Paradiso as the goal attack, and they are just formidable up forward. Matthew Fowler is the goal shooter in the Super League competition, South Adelaide. They scored 56 goals against contacts on the weekend. He scored 45 of them. 45 of the 56 goals. They won by 6, contacts 50. So I just reckon keep an eye out for South Adelaide in netball. They are just emerging as the next big thing. Contacts has been around forever. Matrix has been sort of like the modern powerhouse since around about 2000. But yeah, South Adelaide hot on their heels, and I reckon wouldn't be surprised if they go past both of them in the next 6 months.
How big is the is men's netball in Adelaide?
It's really found a bit of a new niche in the last year or so. They've always been completely removed from Netball SA, their own competition, without any links to Netball South Australia. That changed last year, where 6 teams formed a new Super League. So we're actually seeing the men represent what has been the traditional women's clubs. So Garville, Tango, Oakdale, Contacts, South Adelaide, and I should be able to recall the other one, but I can't. But there are 6 teams at the moment. I suspect that competition goes to 8 probably as soon as next year. They've signed a memorandum of understanding with Netball South Australia, so that link will continue to strengthen. They have released a strategic plan, and look, you are the strategic plan person out of the both of us. I'd be interested to see you read that. I think it's probably a little bit wishy-washy for my liking. It doesn't really, I think, stand on a heck of a lot, but all in all, I think men's netball is on the rise. Unfortunately, it got a bit of bad press this week because Fast 5 team did a dance that it seemed like the Ridgy Didge True Blue Australian didn't like too much, even though the fact that every Fast 5 team does some sort of dance is a way the match starts. Anyhow, that's what happened. Very, very strong here in South Australia. It's run by South Australian Men's and Mixed Netball Association. It'll be interesting to see how that relationship with Netball SA develops.
SA's got a strong representation in next year's Sydney to Hobart yacht race.
Yeah, we'll see 4 yachts go around. I always start to think about this in the middle or the late part of November because these boats tend to move away and actually get sailed all the way around the coast, past Victoria, up the east coast and into Sydney Heads because that's where the race starts. But they've got to go through a whole heap of safety checks once they get there. So often these vessels arrive 6, 7, 8 weeks before, and I just thought it was worth having a quick chat about the 4 yachts that'll compete this year. Audacious. All 4 yachts are from the Royal Yacht Squadron. That's a little bit unusual. So the Cruising Yacht Club of SA, which has been very, very strong in Sydney Hobart yacht racing, Doesn't have an entrant this year as far as I can tell. So Audacious will compete out of the Royal Yacht Squadron. That's a Sydney 38 vessel. 38 means 38 feet. So we're talking around about 11.8 metres. Bowline has been a regular competitor. Ian Roberts is the skipper of that boat. He's a former Commodore of the Royal Yacht Squadron. So that's a really interesting entrant. Good boat when it gets the right conditions. That's a Beneteau First 44.7. So you're talking about around about a 13-metre boat there. The third vessel is Clockwork. I love Clockwork. That has just basically sailed all around Australia. It's a mixed crew, a lot of women involved in the crew. Mary Ann, I should be able to remember her name, Mary Ann Harvey is the skipper alongside Andrew Lloyd, I think it is. So I follow those guys pretty closely. Actually, everything I've said I take back because they are from the Cruising Yacht Club of South Australia. I did say it was all four from Royal Yacht Squadron. That's not true. Clockwork is from the Cruising Yacht Club of SA, Sydney 38 as well. And then the fourth vessel is Inukshuk, and I've got the details of that here. It's a North Shore 38, so a very similar vessel. Robert Large is the skipper of this boat, so that'll be a great entrant as well. So probably the most interesting one out of all of those, I reckon, is Audacious. It's actually sailed in, I think it might be 8 or 9 Sydney Hobarts now. It's skippered by Stuart Johnson. Used to be known as Chutzpah. And Chutzpah, people who follow sailing would probably know that competed in 6 Sydney Hobarts as Chutzpah. It then had another owner who sailed it as Audacious, and Stuart Johnson is the third owner, and this will be its third race as Audacious. So, yeah, there's a lot of people who've done a lot of Sydney Hobarts, but Audacious is a vessel that's done a lot as well.
Now, with the AFLW All-Australian squad, we've got 8 players from Port and Adelaide, but there's one to stand out that you wanted to talk about.
No, you're absolutely right, Wallace. 5 from the Adelaide Crows, 3 from Port Adelaide. The one that really intrigues me the most, and is probably the least well known of anyone in the All-Australian squad of 42, is Emily Borg, who was drafted with pick 61 as a 17-year-old in 2022. On draft night, she actually didn't really want to watch it because she'd had almost no interest from clubs, and she really just had resigned herself to the fact that she wasn't going to get drafted. She went out for dinner with a couple of friends, got back to her mum and dad's house where she lived, got into her PJs, was just sitting there watching TV, and her name got called out by Port Adelaide with their 6th selection, pick 61, and her world just changed. Lauren Arnell, the coach, was soon FaceTiming her. So was Erin Phillips, who was the inaugural captain of the Port Adelaide Football Club. This is a 17-year-old kid who turns up for school in Wynn Vale the next day, and she's gone from, you know what it's like in school, you know, you're just another face in the crowd, to kids a year younger than her asking her for an autograph. And she was going, well, I've never signed my name before in my life. I don't know what to do here. So amazing. They're a really interesting family. Her parents foster greyhounds. I'm not trying to talk about the virtues or otherwise of greyhound racing here, but retired greyhounds, they train them up to become pets and then foster them out after they've made the transition. So that's quite a wonderful contribution that this family is making to society. So, yeah, Emily herself, very heavily involved in greyhounds and looking after them and caring for them. She was previously a shot putter, Emily Borg. So she was an athlete who was number 2 in Australia in the shot put back in 2018. And the only reason she got into football was because her sister was playing for Golden Grove and the team was short. And her sister leaned on her to come out and have a kick of the footy, and she was hooked. Went to play for North Adelaide and then got picked up, as I said, pick 61 in 2022 by the Power at AFL level. And sure enough, 2 years on, she's in the All-Australian squad. So what a story, Emily Borg.
Wonderful.
Probably the only person ever to find out that she's been drafted while wearing her PJs.
Give us a wrap on volleyball, the awards, and also a surprise Asian champions.
Yeah, a couple of quick ones here. Jack Pearce and D'Artagnan Potts, 2 South Australian boys, have won the Asian Championships against all the odds. It's only the 3rd time they've ever competed together as a pairing. They made it through to the semi-finals. They took on a Chinese pair that were expected to blow them away, and they did the opposite, blew the Chinese pair away, and then beat the reigning Australian champions, knocked them over in the final as well. So a couple of names worth keeping an eye out for. Jack Pearce. Now, Pearce is an interesting spelling. It's Pearse. And D'Artagnan Potts, D with an apostrophe, D'Artagnan, if you like, Potts. So a couple of good young beach volleyball stars that I reckon you might be starting to think about going to the 2028 Los Angeles Games. Interestingly enough, I was going to make a bit of a point about how annoyed I get at the fact that the tennis stadium at Memorial Drive gets used for 1 week of the year, and the other 51 weeks it pretty much lies dormant. I've only learnt recently that that's going to host the World Beach Volleyball Championships, I think in October, coming up next year. So I think that's a good outcome, but that is still a bit of a white elephant in that place. It hosts one decent tennis tournament a year and not much else. Right, I'll move on to the Volleyball League award winners. There was a couple of things that went on. Firstly, the Tanya Tanagorski Trophy. So this is like McGarry Medal, if you speak Australian rules football, was won by Annalise Schuff. And the men's best and fairest, which is the Ray Harris Trophy, was shared between Ryan Scudder and Will Mercer. So congratulations to those two. And then I just thought it was worth pointing out that the MVP and players player for the Adelaide Storm in the Australian Volleyball Super League, that was Rebecca Reeve for the women. The men's MVP was Charlie Disbury. And the men's players player was Harrison Peacock. So there you are, in about 85 seconds, my wrap on South Australian volleyball. But we've got some really good up-and-comers. The Adelaide Storm is a great watch. The season's obviously just finished, so start to think about this for 2025. But if you want a cheap, good, fun, entertaining night out, go and have a look at the Adelaide Storm men and women. Not only are they really entertaining and a good sport to watch, I think it's a fantastic indoor sport to watch, but they're a really good bunch as well. They will put on a show for you and, sign autographs, photos with kids, all of those sorts of things after they're right into it. So the Adelaide Storm, really good group. South Australian Volleyball had their big awards on Saturday night. Congratulations to the major winners.
And just out of interest, where do they play?
I think they've played some games at Netball SA Stadium, and I think they've played at Basketball SA Stadium as well. So I think mostly it's at Netball SA Stadium, which is about a 3,000 capacity, and I think they do a pretty good job of filling that out.
Awesome, Hookie. Great to chat.
Always fun, my man. Sorry it's so late. What is the time? It's after 10 o'clock. Can you believe that?
See you next week.
Good on you, mate.
Wallace, before we wrap things up, I have a quick update on Steven Spud Alderson. People will remember a couple of weeks ago, he won the G4D tournament in Andalusia, which is in Spain. It was a huge story. Stephen is from the Wollonga Golf Club. He has autism and so is a part of this Golf for Disability string of tournaments. Because he won that one, he got into the World Championship, the DP World Championship, which is the final series of rounds of the DP World Tour, which is formerly known as the European Tour. Anyway, Spud has won that overnight, which I think is just tremendously exciting. Won by 5 strokes there in Dubai. What a story that is. He'll tee it up at the Australian Open in their All Abilities field in a couple of weeks. That's, of course, at Victoria and Kingston Heath Golf Club. But our own Steven Spud Alderson from the Wollonga Golf Club is the DP Tour World Championship champion. What a story.
Run through the finishing tape on another episode of Hooked on Sport. If you've got a local sporting story to share, send us a message via our socials or by email hookedonsportpodcast@gmail.com. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast and let your mates know about us. Tell them to search Hooked on Sport to find Ben Hook and the team. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.